So when you're first looking into the luxury watch industry, the watches that are going to stand out to you are the big ones, right? They're the Rolex Submariners, the AP Royal Oaks, the Patek Philippe Nautiluses, but these are out of reach for most people, including myself. They're very expensive. So in this video, we're going to be covering 8 iconic watches and their affordable alternatives. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And let's start with the biggest brand in the world, producing over 1.2 million watches a year. Let's start with the Rolex Explorer 2. The Rolex Explorer 2 has earned its stripes in the watch industry and amongst enthusiasts as being the outdoorsy watch. It's the watch that you would take skiing or take hiking or take on photography trips. It is the functional man's watch. It is, at its core, a tool watch. It's a GMT model. It can read multiple time zones at the one time. It has a beautiful white dial. That's the one that I would go for. But you also have a choice of a black. It comes in at 42 millimeters and the bezel is in full stainless steel. And that is a dying breed in the industry. I mean, it's quickly getting replaced with ceramic everywhere you turn, but I'm kind of one for the old ways. Maybe it's the age I am now, 27, I'm getting there, I'm moving towards 30, but I am definitely one for the old ways, and I prefer that stainless steel bezel. So where can we find an affordable alternative to the Rolex Explorer 2? Something that's readily available and a lot cheaper. Well, that is where Christopher Ward come in. The Christopher Ward C63 Sealander GMT. Now, on first impressions of this watch, when you first look at it, you might notice a ton of similarities between, you guessed it, the Rolex Explorer 2 and this watch, including that stainless steel bezel, the orange GMT hand, and obviously the white dial if that's the one you choose to go for. There's so many similarities between the two of these watches, but what's not similar is the price. This comes in at £1,060. Whereas, if you were to get the Rolex Explorer 2 and you were to pick it up new, and that's if you can get it new, because there's still a waiting list for these Rolex watches, it comes in at £8,550. The C63 is a little bit smaller than the Rolex Explorer 2, coming in at 39 millimeters in diameter. It, of course, comes in full stainless steel, has a height of 11.85 millimeters and a lug-to-lug of 45.8 millimeters. It is a GMT model and it has the Sellita SW330-2 GMT movement. This has 25 joules, beats at a frequency of 28,800 VPH, and has 56 hours of power. Now, yes, the movement in this watch is not as good as the Rolex Explorer 2's movement, but remember, you're paying literally 1/8 of the price. Next on the list, we have the Omega Speedmaster, the first watch on the moon, the first watch to accompany Buzz Aldrin to the moon itself, which is just a pinnacle of history. And the fact that this watch has that history attached to it is just magic. With that said, I am of the opinion that if you strip the moon landings away, if you strip the kind of connection between the space missions and this watch away, this is still a bloody good-looking watch. And it's highlighted by, of course, the white Speedmaster that came out recently that is just unbelievable. Now, the Omega Speedmaster isn't cheap at all. It comes in at £7,500, and that is with the sapphire crystal glass. So my brain, thinking about this logically, said, I want to find a cheap alternative that comes in at below £1,000. And that is where the Seiko Prospect Speed Timer 1969 recreation came in. The 1969 Speed Timer is inspired by the lines of the world's first automatic chronograph watch. Now, this is a chronograph watch. It comes in at 39 millimeters in diameter, 13.3 millimeters in thickness, and 45.5 millimeters in case length, or lug to lug. Now, the lug width is a little bit smaller, coming in at 20 millimeters. It has 10 bar of water resistance, or 100 meters. It has curved sapphire crystal glass, and it also has a solar movement, the caliber V192 solar movement. This is accurate to 15 seconds per month. It comes in full stainless steel, and it does look extremely similar, although a little bit more colourful than the original Speedmaster. But one thing that's not so similar is the price tag. This comes in at £640. The next watch on the list, I kind of struggled with, and the reason that I struggled with it is because I picked the Omega Seamaster, but there is the no date version and the date version. I like the date version because it's the king, but the no date version seems to be the more popular and the more recent. But whichever one you go for, there's no denying that they are totally iconic. That helium escape valve, although some people might hate it, I absolutely love it. I think it gives it a point of difference to other watches and a point of distinction being an Omega watch. The Omega Seamaster, of course, has been featured in a ton of the James Bond movies. And I think that's part of the attraction of the Seamaster, if I'm totally honest. I think people that have that sentimental attachment to James Bond, like myself, I used to watch it with my dad, like the Seamaster for that reason. Not to mention the movement in this thing. Koskin Metas certified caliber 8800. That's how much of a nerd I am. I know that off by heart. Is just unbelievable. Now, if you were to get the date bracelet version of the Seamaster, it comes in at £5,600. So in my brain, I said, why don't we keep the diving gravitas of the Seamaster, but shave around about £4,500 off that price point? This is the Middle Ocean Star 600 chronometer. It comes in at 43.5 millimeters in diameter, 14.6 millimeters in thickness, so yes, it is a damn thick boy, and the lug width is 22 millimeters. It comes in full stainless steel and has sapphire crystal glass with double-sided anti-reflective treatment, the same as the Seamaster. It has 600 meters of water resistance, so that's double the Seamaster, because the Seamaster has 300, and then it has a fully rotating ceramic bezel. It has a full stainless steel bracelet and case, but the movement is obviously not as good as the Seamaster. It has the middle automatic chronometer ETA movement, and this is COSC certified and has 80 hours of power. The dial on this watch is just beautiful. It kind of has like a gradient, lighter blue going into black in the center of this dial, and I love depth to dial. If you guys know me, you'll know that I love depth to dials, and it's super sexy. Now the price is even more sexy. It comes in at £1,670. For that money, you're getting a functional tool watch, the same as the Seamaster. Yes, it might not be as good technically, but you're getting a bloody good watch. The next watch we have is part of Genta's genius. He designed the AP Royal Oak, and it quickly became part of the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity being made up of Vacheron Constantin, Patek Philippe, and AP. Now, the Royal Oak was definitely way ahead of its time when it was designed. It's very futuristic, very angular, and at the point of its release, it was a bit obscure. But then it kind of grew into itself, and everybody loves it. And AP is a brand that have gained so much popularity, especially in the last 10 years. In fact, they are now shutting down all their retailers and going direct to consumer, just AP to the consumer, instead of having retailers. And that's how exclusive these watches are. Now, with exclusivity comes pretty high prices and also pretty high waiting lists. This comes in at around about £24,000, and that's if you can get it new. And that's a huge if, because AP's production numbers are very, very low. Now, my first thoughts when picking an affordable alternative kind of led me to the Tissot PRX or the Christopher Ward 12. But instantly in my brain, I kind of thought, that's really boring. Why don't you keep looking? Find something new, something a bit more fresh that still has the affordable alternative to appeal to the Royal Oak. And I found it. This is the Citizen EcoDrive Sport. And on the EcoDrive Sport, you can see some of the same DNA as the AP Royal Oak. For example, and not to the same extent, obviously, you're not paying £26,000 for this watch or £24,000 for this watch, but you can see the patterns on the dial. You've got some depth on the dial. You can see the angular design of the case and the bracelet. This watch comes in at 41 millimeters in diameter. It, of course, has a full stainless steel case and bracelet and is water resistant to 100 meters. It has mineral crystal instead of sapphire crystal, which essentially isn't as good, but once you see the price, you'll realize why. And it has the Citizen EcoDrive movement. Now, the EcoDrive movement is actually really, really cool because it is powered by any kind of light. So I could have it in unnatural light, for example, right now in the studio, just my aperture light, and it would be charging on my wrist. And because of this, you really don't need to replace the battery, like ever. Not to mention the fact that this comes in at £229, so a fraction of the price of your AP. The next watch on the list needs no introduction. It is the Patek Philippe Nautilus, the creme de la creme of the watch industry, apart, of course, from Vacheron. And I'm not going to go too much into detail on the Patek Philippe Nautilus because everybody knows about the Patek Philippe Nautilus. But when we look at the general design of the Nautilus, the square kind of angular design is what sticks out to most of us. So I tried to find a watch that wasn't as expensive as the Nautilus, which is quite easy because the Nautilus is very expensive, but still has that square design. And that's where I stumbled upon the Bell & Ross BR-05. This watch comes in at 40 millimeters in diameter, has sapphire crystal glass with anti-reflective coating, of course has that iconic squared look to it. It also has that integrated bracelet, which gives this watch a ton of flair. Now, this watch comes in at £4,600. Now, to be honest, I've never been that much of a fan of Bell & Ross. It's just not my thing. And that's not to say it's bad or that they're bad watches. They're great watches, but it's just not my cup of tea. But when you have a price like this, £4,600 versus Patek Philippe Nautiluses or maybe 60 grand, you can't complain. When it comes to absolute icons in the industry, I think that the Rolex Submariner definitely takes the cake. I think that is the watch that everyone thinks of when they think of a modern, sporty look and feel. But with that said, because of the popularity, you have huge waiting lists. And because of those huge waiting lists, you have huge residual values. And the value of this watch new, not with the residuals, is still £8,100. So let's find a cheap alternative. You know, my first thoughts here took me to the Longines Hydra Conquest GMT or the Tudor Black Bay Monochrome or Black Bay. But then I thought of a watch that I reviewed last year, and it was actually just a lot of fun, like a huge amount of fun, and also it was a lot cheaper. This is the Hamilton Khaki Navy Scuba Automatic. Now, yes, don't get me started on the colors because the colors are absolutely crazy. But if you replace the yellow strap or the pink strap or whatever you want for a black, and then just have that splash of color on the dial, this is actually a really fun watch. It comes in at 40 millimeters in diameter, 12.95 millimeters in thickness, is water resistant to 100 meters, and has a power reserve of 80 hours powered by the H10 movement. This full package comes in for £790, which is a lot cheaper than the Rolex Submariner. And I just love where Hamilton are going with their ranges at the moment. They have fun with their watches, they listen to the community, and that's something you don't find every day. Next on the list, we have the Tudor Black Bay Heritage. Now, you can go for whatever color of this watch you want. For me, personally, I have the burgundy version, the original ETA burgundy version, but you can go for whichever one you want. Now, the new versions are COSC and METAS certified, which is just unbelievable for £4,010. Their sizing is brilliant, coming in at 41 millimeters, having 200 meters of waterproofness. I mean, Tudor are a brand that are just getting it right. And Tudor are normally the brand that people say is Rolex's affordable alternative. But what's Tudor's affordable alternative? Well, I think I found one. This is the Timex Harbourside Coast 43 millimeters. It comes in at 43 millimeters, has a case height of 11 millimeters, is water resistant to 100 millimeters. It is a quartz watch, so it does have a quartz movement in it, unfortunately, and it has a black rubber strap. The dial of this watch is to die for. It has a black bezel, and honestly, I think if you are on a massive budget and you only have £100 to spend, but you want something similar to a Tudor, then I would go for this. I mean, it comes in at £95, and for that, you really can't complain. Next up, we have a Cartier tank, the watch that was designed over a literal tank. I mean, the head of Cartier thought, how do we make this watch more masculine? How do we appeal to the male market? And then he looked at a tank, because the war was going on, and he thought, that's how we make it more masculine. So the Cartier tank comes in at around about £3,700, and there is a brand that produce square watches that nobody talks about, and I think it's because most people talk about the Oris Aquis because it's a diving watch and it's one of the most popular watches in their inventory. But the rectangular Oris, which is literally called the rectangular, is rectangular, so it's similar. This watch comes in at 25.5 millimeters in diameter by 38 millimeters in length. It's water resistant to 3 bar or 30 meters and has a fully automatic movement with 38 hours of power. Whereas the Cartier, the tank, has a quartz movement. So actually you're getting a fully automatic movement, and this comes in at £1,800. And that is all from me today. If you did enjoy, please consider hitting that subscribe button, or head to our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches, or my Instagram at HP Life Lens, or our podcast at Into the Mind Podcast. And I'll see you guys real soon.